Now, the performance standards, which is Section 2400, are your baseline expectations of the conduct that should be undertaken during an IT assurance contract. Now, some examples, again, of the criteria when it comes to planning and supervision. The objectives and criteria, are they well stated? Do we know what their goals are and what we're supposed to do? Do we have the appropriate levels of assurance that are needed or required? Have we found the appropriate sources of information and evidence? The availability of resources with the needed skill sets, making sure management-wise, right, the minimum baselines, that we're not putting unskilled, unknowledgeable people in over their head trying to do an audit of something they don't understand. So again, skill sets. Preliminary conclusions on assignment and audit risks. That's an important part of management, and I keep seeing these. I know that we're going to talk more about risk, and remember, we're building a foundation. So a lot of times you might be saying, again, there's that audit risk. All right, we're getting there. We're working our way into that. Right now, we're just putting it into these standards, and then as we fill in those pieces, you'll say, okay, now I really get it. But management is again, tasked not only with the planning. But to look at the fact that there is a risk when we do audit, and to be able to have preliminary information about that. What other minimum baselines? Resource and expertise requirements. Remember, resources often are referenced to the people doing the audit. The planning and timeline of the assurance tasks. Now, timeline is very important, by the way. Many times we have to find an appropriate time to do an audit of a certain control. And usually, depending on the goal and the objective, we don't want to interrupt business either. And so often we have to make sure that people know when we're going to do these, make sure that's approved, that it's a good time, and again, it's all part of the planning process. Making sure you have reasons why you might extend or modify the assurance worker's audit. And that could be from some irregularity you might not have expected to see. And it might cause there to be a reason to extend or change the original plans. And of course, with any type of contract or charter, part of the minimum standards we expect is the establishment of time and cost budgets, right? No overruns unless it's justified as a part of reasons, like I said, to extend or modify. But that's why we have to have, these types of standards put into the performance of what we do. So that I just don't have people automatically getting the extra pay, the extra billable hours, and going over the cost budget. So, again, Section 2400 to be able to look at a little more detail if you need to about these performance standards. Now, the next part of your performance standards gets us into the area of obtaining sufficient evidence. So again, remember, we're looking at those minimum standards or baselines. So we should have, as a part of these, the audit procedures. They should be followed so that we can obtain the sufficient and appropriate audit evidence to use as our basis for conclusions. We should, as a part of our performance, when it comes to evidence, expect that there's documentation of the evidence that was obtained, because that needs to be able to be inspected. People want to be able to observe or see, to make inquiries, and even confirm the work or the results that you came up with. We need to have documentation that all the evidence was considered to support the audit procedure. I think back into the days of forensic evaluation of computer files, when we talk about the documentation of evidence. And it was very important that we remembered that when you're going through and digitally examining a hard drive, and you know what the caseworker's looking for, they're looking for evidence of some crime, and you find that evidence, well, of course, we document it, we report it. But it's, I think, also equally important, because we said it in forensics, and I'm saying it here as the example about evidence, that all evidence is considered. If you found evidence that disproved what the investigator is looking for, you don't hide it. You don't, disappoint them or ruin their day. I mean, eventually in forensics, we're talking about a person's livelihood. You report all the evidence, and so you want to document all the evidence, good or bad. And then, of course, now it sounds like you're not being objective, right? You just report all of it. You look at all of it in the consideration of what you're using for evidence to support your eventual results. And of course, you want to make sure that you have documentation of what tests were performed along with the test results. Now, as we're still talking about the performance standards, we also have assignment performance. Now, assignments must be scheduled with appropriate timing, availability, and as of course must be balanced against all of the other commitments and requirements that management has. And remember that whatever the assignment is, that it must be assigned within the skill set of the person that got that task assigned to them. So we want to be careful to make sure we're not putting the wrong resources in the wrong area. As we look at the rest of the performance standards, the last one are representations. Now, all received representations should be documented and retained by the IT assurance professional. And when people say, well, what does that mean? What's a representation? It means something that people have told you, right? This could include the statements that an auditor received that shows an acknowledgement of responsibilities in those processes being audited, or a statement by the people being audited, what we call the auditee, acknowledging responsibilities for the criteria. In other words, they represented to us that they acknowledged their responsibilities. And we want to record these things down. So we basically have notes that are covering all of these aspects of communications. You should also include all contradicting assertions that have been disclosed, and statements and other communications from regulators, if you have them, and basically any other matter that you, the auditor, might think is relevant or appropriate to the audit at hand. All of those representations, like I said, they should be recorded when they're received and documented. Now, the reporting standards will reflect the types of assignments that was performed by the auditor or by the assurance person or professional. And the reporting standards should address, of course, the types of reports that we're going to have, the means in which they are communicated, and of course what information is going to be communicated through the reporting standards. Now, at a minimum, your reporting standards should include some of the following things. The obvious stuff: to whom the report is directed, as well as the nature and the objectives of the assignment. That's kind of like the big intro, right? To whom it may concern. This is my last will and test. No, this is what we were doing. Is the objectives of the audits and the assignments that we had. That means that we also need to talk about in general what's covered by the IT assurance report. There should be a confirmation of the subject matter or assertions that are being reported, a review of the nature of the scope of work, the time frame in which this review took place, references to any of the applicable professional standards, and any management assertions. Again, remember we said we were going to keep those assertions and record them and use them. Other things that should be in your reports, of course, are the criteria. The criteria against which the subject matter that you're looking at was weighted. Conclusions on the level of assurance that's being provided. Any reservations that the IT audit and assurance professionals might have. Any restrictions on the distribution of the report could also be very important, because audits do get into areas that may be very sensitive and of very confidential information for that organization. So we want to make sure we know, basically that we don't want it out there on WikiLeaks. The date of the report and where it was issued, the name of the issuer of the report, and the auditor and assurance professional's signatures, which of course is the verification that they actually have read the report. At least hopefully they did before they signed it. Now, we also had under ITAF the assurance guidelines. This was section 3000. Now, actually in this section there are many other subsections that are a part of it, and the IT assurance guidelines are broken down into 4 basic areas, and we're going to look at each 4 of them. Section 3200 was the enterprise topics. Section 3400 is the IT management processes. Section 3600 dealt with the IT audit and assurance processes. And Section 3800 dealt with the IT audit and assurance management. Now, each of these areas are going to focus on the IT issues and processes that a professional should understand and consider during the planning, the scoping, the execution, and reporting of the IT or assurance activities. Now, you notice how that pretty much covered all aspects of this entire audit, right? From planning, scoping, execution, and reporting, right? From start to begin, or even pre-start planning. Now, each of these areas are going to focus on the processes and procedures, the methodologies and approaches that will be considered when you conduct the IT assurance activities. Again, guidelines, trying to help guide you through this process of doing the audit.